Hey, everybody. Welcome to Healed Whole Called podcast. I'm Wendy Melrose, founder of the Brazilians Press, and we believe God redeems our stories and uses them to bring healing and purpose to others. This is where we have real conversations about healing, resilience, faith, and calling that come from life's hardest seasons. And if you're joining us live today, say hello in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Today, I'm honored to welcome my friend, Hector Del Valle. Hector is a nationally recognized, award-winning bilingual speaker, disability advocate, mentor, and social worker. For more than 40 years, he has navigated life from his wheelchair, using his journey not as a limitation, but as a platform to inspire change and serve others. Through his advocacy work, Hector has helped champion disability rights, accessible housing, and dignity for people with disabilities, even working with legislators to create lasting change. His life is a powerful example of resilience, faith, and what it looks like to turn personal challenges into a life of purpose and service. So, hey, Hector, glad to have you here today.
Hey, Wendy, it's great to be here. This is awesome.
So share with the world where you're joining us from. I know you mentioned the beautiful park that we're seeing the ceiling of the nice pavilion you're in, but where are you joining us from?
Well, I'm enjoying you from Chiliota, Florida, and AKA the office. All right. Every time I leave in the morning, my nurse is saying, "Hey, Hector, where are you going?" I said, "Of course, I'm going to the office." And of course, you can't see it, but you're seeing the top of the pavilion. But this is Lake Mills Park, and I don't want to make everybody dizzy, so I'll try to be still for your viewers. But this is Lake Mills Park. It's an old park that's been around for years and years and years, has a lot of history, but it was just recently made accessible for wheelchairs because once it was just one big lawn, really, and you couldn't get around in one big lawn in a wheelchair and stuff like that. So they were smart enough to put a walkway through, and they did a huge walkway, and it just all around the park. It's just a beautiful park to be at. And this is where I come to meditate, to focus, to get inspired, and talk with God.
That's awesome. So I'd love to start with the question on when you look back on your journey, what did you first realize what you were walking through wasn't just something to endure, but something God could use for purpose?
Well, first, I didn't even, I grew up in a very religious family. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy and so forth. But I didn't know really what that meant. I thought church was something that you had to go to. It wasn't a choice. Parents took you there and so forth, and they told you to be good or God was going to get you. So I grew up with a very fearful God, not in that sense, in the terms fearful, but I did. I grew up, fearing God, didn't want to really have much to do with God. And then at 17 years old, when I ended up in a wheelchair, I said, whoa, what kind of God is this that would allow things like this to happen, And I was really angry for God for many, many, many years until I came back. But I was at the ripe old age of, I don't know, I was in my 50s by the time I came back and got involved in my church, got baptized in 2017, and could really see him in my life today. I mean, I have a real relationship with God today.
That's awesome. And do you want to share details of the accident? What would I know you wanted to be on the live? I want you to have the freedom to share, the message that you wanted to share with everybody today.
Well, really, I did my memoirs. Thank you very much, Wendy Melrose, for helping me with that. It's called Beyond the Chair, Thriving Through Transition with God. And that's really where I wanted to really go public about Jesus. And for a long time, I really didn't talk about Jesus. I didn't know how to talk about Jesus. Once I got baptized in 2017, I really got, really hung out with some men that were really touched by God. And they were just amazing to listen to hear, to see how they knew the Bible and how they had it all memorized and stuff like that. And they used to blow me away. I said, man, that's exactly what I want. But I think God had other plans for me. And he goes, Hector, I just want you to be you.
Yeah.
All right? Just be you. Don't try to be a prophet. Don't try to be one of these, pastors that, memorize the Bible and everything. Just be you, So yeah, Wendy, so I'm all over the place. I also got ADHD on top of the paralysis and stuff like that. So you'll have to really control me and you have to remind me, ask me the questions a couple times in order for me to stay on track what I want to do, because my life really has taken off. And a matter of fact, I'm doing right now. I know you know my good friend Pauline Victoria, and
Mm-hmm.
years ago we did something called the Visibility Challenge. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you just get in front of a camera for 30 days, with no script or anything like that. You just go on and just be you, just so you could be used to the camera and about just being yourself. So I'm doing one of those again. And I wasn't on yesterday, and I missed. I was doing great. I was doing like 6, 7 in a row. And yesterday, for some reason, I usually like to try and knock them out in the mornings, but I kept on saying, "Oh, I'll do it later. Oh, I'll do it later. Oh, I'll do it later." Anyway, 9 a.m. the next day came along and said, "Oh man, I didn't do it." You know, but I knew why. I kept procrastinating. I kept putting a thing because I didn't know what I was going to talk about. And that's the whole thing about it. You're just supposed to go on and just be you. You might want to have a couple, have something in your mind that you want to talk about, but I couldn't come up with anything, or I felt like I needed to come. You see, I thought I had to come up with something profound, and I couldn't come up with anything profound, so I skipped it. And today it had me just a wreck today, because then I said, oh man, now I got to go do this thing with Wendy. I got to go do her interview and stuff like that. And I don't have anything profound to say and everything else like that. So it was just driving me nuts. And so I really just got into my prayer today. I said, God, what's going on here? Why am I feel like I'm missing out on something here? Why do I feel like I'm feeling empty right now? And I'm trying to swing this by myself,
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, well, we should take a look at that, So I always have my little God voice in my head, but I really do feel like the message that he gave me today, he goes, Hector, instead of it being about performance, why don't you just make it about service, and what can I do today for you? Because once I come from that mindset, Wendy, there's no anxieties, there's no anxiety. So however I can help anybody that's out there that has a question for me or wants to know about the accident. I was 17 years old, captain of the gymnastics team, ended up hitting 2 cars in a brick wall, which left me paralyzed from the chest down. Again, I had that whole attitude that nothing could harm me because I was 17 years old. I was invincible, and I could drink, and I could go out with girls, and I could drive my car that I only had for 6 months, driver's license I only had for 6 months, and I can go as fast as I wanted to. And so that night I ended up picking up 2 girls, and we ended up hitting 2 cars in a brick wall. And it was, it was most likely my fault, but there was another car involved. It ended up to be a no-fault accident, but it left me paralyzed from the chest down. And I really thought that it was all about taking my mobility away, taking my ability to walk and be independent. And it was definitely about that. But later on in life, I found out that it was more than that. It took away my identity. I didn't really know who I was now that I was paralyzed. So
Mm-hmm.
now my work is all about, who I am today. What is my purpose today, despite the paralysis? So
Right.
putting the paralysis aside and say, okay, Hector, you got paralysis. So what? What do you want to do now, or what can you do now?
Right.
And that's where God helped me out with. Well, I can share my story in a different way. In regards to now, I'm sharing my story about how God has a big influence on my life instead of
Well,
me
that's
trying to do it by myself.
absolutely. And one of the biggest things that we hear from time to time is, if you weren't able to do, you were 17, so you were just getting started in life. But, so often you'll hear like singers or actors or even people who are engineers or whatever, like if you weren't able to do that ever again,
Mm.
what would you do? And so often our identity is tied to what we do. And
Right.
it isn't tied to what we do or who we are. It is tied to who we are in Christ and who we can do and be served and be loved. And
Mm.
I love, your whole advocacy part, where you're trying to help people. Hey, Gregory Hall, be able to just, like, were you a part of the influence on getting the park that you're sitting in right now changed to where it's disability accessible?
Not personally, no. I wasn't involved in this, but I have been involved in other recreational devices, trying to get more not adaptive recreational equipment for children's, like a seesaw that can take a wheelchair up, and stuff like that. So I've been involved in other advocacy projects, just not this specific park. Sure. Why she's choking on her water there. I'm not going to make you laugh. Don't laugh. Don't laugh with water, please. Don't make me dial 911.
Yeah, right. I don't know what just happened. Anyway, I'll be right back.
No problem.
Well, the thing is showing up regardless of what happens on air, right?
There you go.
I guess
anything can happen live.
Anyway, but being in whether you're in advocacy or not, not everyone can make a difference. Without even being an advocate for anything specific. It's just making sure that you're listening to God every day. You had one second.
Yeah.
When you had said that God said to be you and just realize it's not about the attention. It's not about doing anything perfect. And once we realize that life is about just asking the Lord, what is it that you have me called to do today to make a difference in the world today? And it could be just as simple as, walk across the street and say hi to your neighbor. It doesn't have to be how much money you're bringing in or how much money you're giving away, or, this isn't how everything is measured. God just measures it based upon us being, trusting in him, right? That's one of the biggest things I'm learning this year is just how to, a relationship with the Lord is just trusting in him and his goodness and realizing every day that goodness is about releasing any expectations on us. We're the ones that put the expectations on us. The world puts the like, Hector, what are you going to do about it now that you're paralyzed?
Right.
The world's the only one that puts that expectation on. Hector is still Hector. Wheels or legs. It is the same. I mean, it's different, but you know what I mean. Your person. I mean, it's like it doesn't change who you are and who God created you to be. You're just your ability to move from legs to wheels.
Oh, I like that as a title. Legs to wheels.
Still,
yeah, but I see where I see. Right. I see where you're going with this, Wendy, and it really does, for me, it's a real personal, when they say it's a personal relationship, it really is, because he uses the Bible. For me, when I read the Bible, it's really a guide. I'm not reading just stories from old, from 2,000 years ago. I'm really, really reading a guide on how I can apply the message in the Bible to today. There's a really good book out there called The Power of Now, and it just talks about how often do we really spend time in the present instead either in the past or in the future, and that's where we get all overwhelmed. That's where we all get stressed out. We get stressed out not knowing what it's going to be like in the future, or feeling guilt and shame because of what we've done in our past, So for me, I had to really learn how to spend time with Jesus. And a friend that helped me out with that was a friend of mine, Patrick, where, we were outside of my back patio, a house where I used to live in. He goes, Hector, this is such a beautiful backyard. And I was struggling one day. I was struggling with just trying to spend time with prayer and spend time with just having conversations with Jesus and so forth. And he goes, Hector, did you ever just sit out here, put another empty chair in front of you and just talk with Jesus? And I said, come on, dude, what do you think? I'm crazy? I'm not going to do that, but I did it, and it started out. He goes, Hector, man, put a timer on for 1 minute. And that's what I did. I put a timer on for 1 minute and I started having this conversation with Jesus. And that's when it started making a difference. And then that 1 minute started turning into 3 minutes and 5 minutes and 15. Now I can't stop talking to Jesus. Now I'm constantly talking to Jesus. So that's, for me, is where it got personal. And it's not like one, I'm not trying to learn how Christians do it. I'm just trying to learn what my God is all about, you know, what God really wants me, Hector, to really be doing in this life. So it's moving. And sometimes I just wake up, you know, and the first thing I just say is thank you, you know,
Right.
because there's a lot of gratitude here. It's overwhelming sometimes. It's really, I'm very grateful to be alive. And it's not about how much I do today, but it's about what I do today, with whom I do it with today, and so
Right.
forth. So I know it still sounds strange. I'm still putting it together, and I need people like you to help me out, because it's meeting people like you, Wendy, that helps me to put it into words, like putting it into our collaboration books that you helped us out with. You
Mhm.
know, taking people's story, bringing it together, and coming out with some great books that are doing very well for the authors that were involved in them.
That's awesome. Well, and in realizing that when we go to, you had said all the voice inside, that is the Lord. We overcomplicate what it's like to hear him. And he's talking to us all the time. Now, whether you choose to acknowledge his existence or not, you're still his. He
Amen.
still loves you.
Amen.
Whether you choose Jesus or don't choose Jesus, he still loves you. And so he's always, ministering us, talking to us, say, guiding us. You can call it the still voice, or you can call it, our creator, but it's still the same person. And when we're in the moment, you had kind of rewind back a minute, being in the moment. It's like when we get beyond where we are right now, it creates anxiety, right?
Guys.
We think about, like, anytime I've ever been like the Lord, I'm like, Lord, I don't have money for this up here. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you have enough for today. Well, yeah. Well, then you're fine, then, aren't you? Well, yes. Then it's the same thing for, kind of like when I'm sure when you were trying to get that accessible van, right?
Right. Oh
I don't
man.
know what that whole journey was, but if I could imagine what it was, I have a friend of mine who's paralyzed. She's been trying to get an accessible van. They're very, very expensive.
Big
And so
time.
she bought a regular van and is having it retrofitted to have a seat. I mean, she's doing whatever she can so she can get around. The level of
Right.
aggravation that someone who is permanently confined to wheels, it's annoying, and I see it. I mean, I would love to figure out, like, how can we make this where it's not so expensive so people can get what they need to get. And I don't have enough connections in the advocacy world like you do to be like, stop making this. I mean, I get that stuff costs money and we want it installed correctly for safety, but it
Right.
doesn't make any sense how a minivan for people with legs is $50,000 less than people who need it for wheels. And you have less seats because they don't need the stupid seats.
Right. It's a chaotic world, really, Wendy. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, you know, that the people who need this, and it's not that we need it for, uh, it's not that we need it for to make our life more comfortable. It's a medical necessity, you
Mhm.
know, and so forth, you know, just like medicine is today. And why they have to be so expensive, it's beyond me. So I know we live in a very chaotic world, a very upside down world, because it's more about power, and it's more about money, it's more about prestige than it is about service, you know. And even our democracy frustrates me at times. And I'm not going to get into politics here with you, Wendy, you know.
That's a good
but
idea.
but I'm just saying that, we the people, should be more, we should have more voice up, in the realm. And I feel like decisions are being made without our voice,
Yeah.
and it gets frustrating sometimes. So you really got to get creative with that advocacy voice, and it's
Mhm.
yes, it is about who you know. But man, I know a lot of legislators, and I smoozed, with Reagan and all the other great, politician stuff. But man, it's still hard to really advocate for so many thousands of people. I'm so grateful that we got the Americans Disability Act, but look what it took in order to get the Americans Disability Act.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's not just one. We really got to come together, and that's why I'm all for inclusion.
Right.
I'm all for universal design. I don't want the whole system to create something just for me. I want the system to create something for all of us, so we're all included, and it's just not one race, or it's not just one party or whatever. How can we really learn to live on this planet, united? and I think we're still trying to learn that.
Well, and so back in the 90s, I went to architecture school. They were talking about ADA and universal design, all that kind of stuff. And, even today, I mean, those of us whose legs are tripping on stuff all the time, wheelchairs would get caught completely. It's like none of it makes any sense. Even in 2026, there's so much room for growth. And here in St. Louis County, they're literally spending, I don't know how much money from COVID dollars, putting sidewalks along these busy streets no one's going to use. Do you want to know why no one's going to use them? It's because you will die if you're trying to wheel yourself or walk yourself along these busy roads. But even that, the way they're going around signs, a person in a wheelchair wouldn't be. It's literally joot, joot, joot. I mean, they didn't create it in a way where you can get around it.
Right.
So it's like whatever they could do to give the least amount of effort is what they did to be in compliance, and that's where the line has got to stop.
Right, and that's just mobility. That's just how do we get people that have mobility impairments? What do we do with those that don't have no sight? Or those who can't hear, and so forth like that. So, I mean, dude, the job to try to make this world inclusive is a big, big job. But I do believe that we'll eventually get there, or at least, when I get to heaven, I won't even have to worry about this stuff.
Well, you'll be right over again. You'll be like, got my legs back.
Exactly.
So, funny.
So, but still, we have to do our best to try to make it, and that's why it comes back to service, when it comes back to, having a mindset of service instead of like always trying to have a positive mindset, which don't get me wrong, it's great to have a positive mindset. But I think when we're trying to use a positive mindset, either to sell our products or stuff like that, that in itself could become stressful and can create anxiety still. So I think going back to how can I really help somebody? For me today, at least today, takes the stress of trying to be successful in that sense of dollar successful, and so forth like that. I mean, I'm still trying to find a way on how, because I know there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there that are in recovery right now from a spinal cord injury, that are in rehab right now, and their families are trying to figure out, what do we do now? They don't know where the resources are. They don't know where, how do I even come up with a life for my son or my daughter or my dad or my mom who's now paralyzed? I don't care if you're paralyzed from the waist down, or the chest down. I mean, people are, overwhelmed with this whole introduction to where do we go now? And I really do appreciate Christopher Reeve and what he's done. And it's always something, Wendy, when a celebrity gets paralyzed or gets an illness or stuff, and all that attention then goes to that. And then, then they're able to raise billions and billions of dollars on research and so forth, like, again, Christopher Reeve did. But I remember I got an opportunity to meet Christopher Reeve twice, and I was the minority outreach coordinator in New York at the time that I did meet him in the 90s. And our job was just to go and meet with him and talk to him about what their needs were. He wanted to know what the needs were. And we had to say, hey, man, of course there's a need for a cure for spinal cord injury, but there's so much more that's needed. Transportation's needed, accessibility is needed, housing is needed, and so forth, education and vocation. I mean, there's so many other things that people still didn't have access to, that still needed attention, to bring some attention to that. So this is a big job. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a job just for Wendy and Hector, but it's definitely a job for all of us to at least become aware on what we could do today. How can I help somebody? Even if it's like, how can I help somebody get across the street? How can I help somebody, open the door for them and so forth like that. So I think it's just, it's not so much about access, but it's about our mindset about how we can help one another to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve.
Nice. That's so good. So before we wrap up, if anybody would love to connect with you to kind of join you in the missions of, helping those who might be newly disabled, or, encouragement, because I know one of your things is, mindset's a big thing. And I've, talking with you, talking to Pauline or any of the other people that I've, gotten to know in the disability community, mindset is huge no matter who you are, but it's definitely when something's happened to you that you didn't want to have happen, or you didn't choose to happen, or you were born with such thing that happened, right? And so if they want to get to know you or connect with you, how would they do that?
hdvspeaks.org. That
So
would be where to go.
that's H is in eight, H is in Hector, V is in Victor, speaks.org.
Yep, there you go. And then you'll find out everything that I'm doing. And if you want to leave a comment or you want to be part of my newsletter or you just want a shirt which says don't diss my ability, then that's the place to go. And that's the guy to talk to.
That's
Right
I
here,
love
by
that
the way.
shirt. Don't diss my ability. That one came out last year, didn't it?
It did. Well, as a matter of fact, it came out a long time ago, but that's another show that we'd have to talk about.
That's so awesome. So is there any words of encouragement you may have with somebody who, might be feeling down and out about their situation in life?
Yeah, man. I mean, I get it, brother and sister. That you're probably taking a look at right now and say, what do I do with this body? That's no longer functioning the way I wanted it to function. I get that, and I think there is a way to get through that, and that's with other peers. That's the one thing, Wendy, that I really avoided when other doctors and therapists were trying to connect me with was other successful people on the outside that had a life, that were having families. They want to show me, Hector, it was still possible to have a life. It was still possible. And that life is totally up to you, depending on your mindset, on how you're going to look at it. Were you just going to look at what you lost, or were you going to still look at, hey, what can I still gain from this situation? Because I know people go crazy when I tell them this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I don't think I would have this specific amazing life that I have today if it wasn't for the injury. So if we could start taking a look at our injuries and our disabilities in a different light, like, instead of saying, why me, why not take a look at, why not ask, God, what is it that you have to show me in this? Because God is always working. He's always working in our lives. He's always trying to, he's always making it better, but we're not paying attention. So I think if we pay attention a little bit more and start asking the right questions instead of, sitting in what I can't do, we should sit in more what God can do.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you, Hector, for this time. We'll have to jump on again when you've got more things going on. And it's been a real joy having you on Healed Whole Called. And so everyone connect with him. He's an amazing person to know. And thanks again. Until next time. Bye, everybody.
Take care.